Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight, tonight I have something extra, extra, extra special for you. Our good friend Suzanne Ruff is with us tonight, the reluctant kidney donor, author, PKD, NKF Kidney Advocate, on the executive committee for the American Association of Kidney Patients, professional writer. Polycystic kidney disease runs in Suzanne's family. On her mother's side of the family, 6 out of 8 people have died from PKD. There are 3 sisters in Suzanne's nuclear family, Janice, Joanne, and Suzanne. 2 out of the 3 had polycystic kidney disease. Suzanne did not inherit, quote unquote, as she calls it, the disease. Suzanne has written a book about her experiences called The Reluctant Kidney Donor. This was back in it's 14 years ago or so. They're still selling this book. It's so popular. A must read, an award-winning book. If you know someone that has kidney disease, care for someone, or personally have kidney disease yourself, you gotta pick up and read this book. And just so you can see, I put my money where my mouth is. There's my copy, The Reluctant Kidney Donor, little dog-eared, particularly this week. And Suzanne was kind enough to inscribe it for me. Thank you, Suzanne. So, Suzanne, on its face, seemed like an unlikely candidate for a kidney donor. She hates needles, illness, hospitals, the thought of being put under anesthetic, not pleasing. She can't stand the sight of blood, including her own blood. Her family history of polycystic kidney disease contributed to that. Losing the people that she loved the most to PKD, a disease she describes as, quote, many cysts that grow on each kidney and choke the kidneys, causing chronic renal failure, unquote, for which there is no cure and can only be treated by dialysis or transplant, a disease, quote unquote, that had wormed its way into her life, quote unquote, since before she was born. This disease, PKD, before her sister was transplanted, terrified her. And that's an understatement. If you read that book, you realize that. She received a phone call from her sister Janice telling her that her other sister Joanne had collapsed in the hospital, had been diagnosed with PKD, and she was told they were getting her ready for dialysis. And those of you that have been on dialysis, you know that's 3 times a week, 4 hours a session. Her mom spent almost 10 years being tethered to that machine. When Suzanne finally spoke to her hospitalized sister, Joanne, Suzanne offered her one of her healthy kidneys, because Suzanne does not have PKD, but afterwards questioned her decision. Suzanne's daughter had also offered Joanne a kidney, but Suzanne vigorously objected to that because of her youth, and again offered one of her own kidneys. This transplant took place October 19th, 2004. In October of this year, she will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of her reluctant kidney donation. This person, the person that had second thoughts about donating, has become a giant in the world of kidney advocacy. In addition to writing one of the most important books in kidney history, she has done about everything that you can do for the American Association of Kidney Patients. Since 2013, when she was stuffing envelopes and typing newsletters when she was quite young, to serving on the executive board currently as treasurer, she has been active in implementing the AAKP's integrated national strategy, has served on numerous committees, acted as a disease subject matter expert for the AAKP Speaker Bureau, has authored numerous articles for the AAKP. She is part of the PKORI project, and she has helped design the AAKP's national and international events. She takes particular delight when people tell her that because of her book, her efforts, her example, that they have decided to donate a kidney. She also has advocated for the PKD Foundation and the NKF. Recently, she's also part of the PKD PAC group for Osaka. She's a professional writer who recently retired as a freelance from the Charlotte Observer. Please, please, please give a warm welcome to my friend and your friend, the great Suzanne Ruff is with us tonight. Suzanne, how are you?
Well, thank you, Jim. I am very well, thank you. And you are just as passionate about advocating for kidney disease as I am. And I greatly admire your work and energy. And you're very much ahead of me in technology. So I am honored to be here.
As I told you before the broadcast, I can't write like you. I'm lucky I can spell my name. So such a tremendous writer and such tremendous work that you have done. Did I state everything correctly in the introduction?
Well, the title of the book is specifically The Reluctant Donor. It doesn't have the word kidney in it, but it is about kidneys.
Okay. I'm glad we got that right. Let's talk a little bit about where you grew up, your education and employment experiences.
Well, I grew up, my parents, John and Joan Gill, they're from the south side of Chicago. We're Irish Catholic from the south side of Chicago. My husband would say we're obnoxiously Irish. We're very proud of it. My mother's maiden name is Dwyer, and it used to be O. Dwyer, and her father's family, my grandfather, they're still in Ireland. I grew up in a wonderful household. I have two sisters, as you mentioned, and we were born one right after the other. I'm the oldest. My two sisters and we went to Catholic school. We did go to the public high school. My jobs, my husband and I married young. My husband and I have been married for 51 years. We've lived in 7 cities. I always joke that my second husband's going to be a farmer who never wants to leave the land. And that's about it.
Okay. I'm sorry. What about your education and employment?
Oh, I worked at, I went back to college when I was 40 to get my degree. And I worked at GE, General Electric, in the tax department for a while. And every time we moved, I'd have to reinvent myself. So mostly I stayed home with the girls, though. We have 2 daughters.
Okay. All right. We talked a little bit about your family. Let's talk about your family and polycystic kidney disease. I want to make sure I have this right. It's my understanding that your mom had PKD, but your father did not. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And she had 3 children, each having a 50% chance of inheriting one of the genes that carries polycystic kidney disease?
Correct.
Okay. In your mother's family, immediate family, there were 8 people, and 6 of them were affected by PKD.
Correct. My mom was the youngest of 6 children, and there was only one child that did not inherit PKD. My grandmother and 5 of her children. My mother was the youngest.
Okay. And I noticed there was a sister, Mike. in your family that you were particularly close to?
Sister Mike is probably the number one reason why I'm sitting here today talking to you. She was my mother's eldest sister. She was a Roman Catholic nun, and she was the wind beneath my wings. She wasn't what the typical nun is portrayed as. She was full of mischief. She was funny. She was goofy. We had so much fun with her, and yet she had incredible faith. And she was probably, and I will get into why she's so special as we go along, but
Oh,
she's the only reason I'm here.
okay. Um, in your mom's family and your immediate family, if we include your cousins, how many people have you lost to polycystic kidney disease?
Including my grandmother, Sister Mike, a few of my cousins. There have been 11 deaths, including my mother and my sister Janice, my youngest sister.
Wow. And you also have children, correct?
I have two children,
What are their names?
Rachel and Colette.
Okay. And do either of your children have PKD?
Because I didn't inherit the gene that causes PKD, my children do not have PKD.
Excellent. Excellent. And I want to ask for the benefit of our audience, has anyone in your family undergone genetic testing, specifically for polycystic kidney disease?
That's a loaded question, Jim. And one I wrote an article about for NKF about a few years ago, what a genetic disease does for families. But yes, I went through genetic testing 20 years ago when I was when my sister Joanne collapsed, and that the experience. Now remember, this is 20 years ago. The experience was frustrating, and after a long wait while Joanne was on dialysis through catheter in her neck, while everybody waited to find out if I was able to donate because I did not have PKD. It was very disappointing when the test results came back and said the test results were inconclusive. So that was the one time I went through genetic testing with Joanne. Now, if you're asking, were we tested to see if we had PKD, my mother and my sisters? Yes, by archaic standards back in the early 1970s. And at that time, that was around the time that the family finally had that aha moment, this is hereditary. And if you think genetic testing has gone so far now, back then it was really archaic. And we were, our parents told us that none of us had the disease after those tests. I was engaged to be married.
Okay.
I think I was 19, and
Wow.
Janice was, or Joanne was 18, or Joanne was 17, 18, and 19. That's how old we were. And my mother was probably in her early 40s. But they said that the tests, that none of us had the disease, is what our parents told us.
Okay, and it turns out 2 of the 3 daughters.
3 out of the 4 of the people that the 4 of us were tested that day, 3 out of 4 did indeed have PKD.
Okay. Let's talk about your mother's experience with PKD. When was your mom diagnosed?
All right, this is complicated. She was tested with us, but said none of us had the disease. She knew that she did have the disease, and they thought it was in our best interest not to tell us. But in order to understand my mom's incredible experience with PKD, I need to tell you how and where she learned all the courage and the strength and her deep faith. When my mom was a teenager, her mother died in 1948, and the family had gathered. Obviously, I wasn't born. The family was gathered around her bed, and my mother always told us that her mother raised herself up from the pillow and said, "Here I am, Lord," and then she died. And then at that point, when I like to connect where we are in PKD research with history. So if that was just after Dr. Kolff, who invented the dialysis machine, was finalizing the development of the machine. The doctors told my grandmother that there was nothing that they could do for her. And I know, Jim, you've lost your father to PKD. So I know that everything I'm saying, you understand. Things have changed so much, but apparently, I mean, my grandmother was 52 and there was nothing. I mean, no dialysis, nothing. And then 18 years later, Sister Mike, she developed failed kidneys, and apparently the family was putting together this might be hereditary. But when Sister Mike in 1966 was ending up in renal failure, dialysis was new, and so there weren't enough machines at that time, and also it was not covered by Medicare, and it was exorbitantly expensive. So Sister Mike gathered her brothers and sisters together to tell them that she had decided to give up her place in line for a dialysis machine because she thought someone with a family deserved her spot. And she died at age 45. And I think that was a pivotal point in my life because her courage and her faith, it was remarkable. And 2 years after Sister Mike died, my mother's two brothers both developed PKD. One of them, and both of them did home dialysis in the 1960s. My Uncle Jack died of an aneurysm. He was on dialysis for a while, and he had been planning to go visit my Uncle Bill, who lived in Maryland, and he had an aneurysm, which is a complication, as you know, from PKD. Well, my Uncle Bill had just started dialysis, and the Knights of Columbus helped him pay for his home dialysis. And my Uncle Bill was the first of the family to receive a transplant from Johns Hopkins in 1974. And he died, he was lucky to have 7 years with the kidney transplant. And he died of stomach cancer, which, as you know, the drugs that PKD patients are given, they didn't know how much to do or how much to give. And the result is it caused cancer. And still, the drugs do carry a risk. Well, my mother collapsed in renal failure the year after Uncle Bill died. And she knew she had it, but she hadn't told any of us. And she just told us, and she told Janice that day that Janice had PKD. So when Mom was on dialysis, I went to visit her one day, and she was sitting there telling me how much of a lucky duck she was because she said, with the death of my brothers and sisters, science learned something to save me. And how my mom lived on dialysis for almost 10 years, I have no idea. She was a trooper, and she was amazing. She had a great sense of humor, and she kept it through dialysis. Did she have bad days? Sure, she did. But she really and truly was an amazing person on dialysis. And during those years, she reached out to help others. And I'm talking too much, but she was, between her and Sister Mike's examples, and not just them, all the rest of my family, they were all there for each other, and they all helped each other through the dark ages. And they taught my sisters and I
Okay. Um, I have a note. Your mother actually achieved a transplant.
Yes, she didn't want a transplant because she had been doing so well on dialysis. And the doctor told her that she was failing and she had to get her name on the transplant waiting list. And I looked it up today. It was in 1988 that she received a transplant. And the number on the waiting list is something like 16,000 back in that year. And she got a she got a kidney transplant on St. Patrick's Day in the city of Chicago, where they dye the river green and where we're 100% Irish Catholic. And she opened one and said, "Now, if that isn't proof that there's a God, I don't know what is." But
Wow.
she did really well with that transplant. Had another 15 years of life because of it. And as a side note, my cousin right now is a Roman Catholic priest, and my mother was his godmother. And he's been on dialysis for about 7, 8 years now. And and he compares himself he thinks of my mom and his Aunt Joan while he does dialysis. So if anybody out there listening wants to donate a kidney to my cousin, Father Bob, let me know.
Do you know where Father Bob is listed?
He's at Loyola in
In
Chicago.
Chicago.
Hmm.
Okay. So someone could call Loyola in Chicago, ask for the kidney transplant unit, ask for Father Bob's transplant coordinator, and volunteer to be tested. Am I stating that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, great, great. Um, my notes tell me that your mom passed away in 2003.
Yes, she did. A few months before Joanne collapsed in kidney failure.
Okay. How long was your mom on dialysis?
Almost 10 years.
Wow. Wow. Um, your exposure to PKD issues have literally been with you since you were born. Before you donated a kidney to Joanne, please describe for us what were your feelings about polycystic kidney disease?
I hate the damn disease. I despise the disease. I pray incessantly about the disease. I've cried buckets of tears over the damn disease. But now first, I should tell you, my chronological age has always been higher than my maturity level. So I fight things within me. I don't like things to be the way they are. I think and I never I just hid away from the disease. I didn't like talking about it, thinking about it, and I mentioned that article I wrote. That's common in families like that have the disease. You know, it's like the elephant in the room, and I really hated it. And some people talk about it like my dad, for instance. My dad shouted from the rooftops that organ donation was wonderful, and other people are more private. Like Father Bob comes from a family of 8 children, and there is polycystic kidney disease in their family. Their mother was my mom's other sister, Aunt Mary Jane, and a lot of them don't want to talk about it because that's how they handle polycystic kidney disease. And all of us have different ways of handling things in life. And for me, I just wanted to not know about it, not talk about it, not think about it. And I just hated it.
Okay. Let's talk about your experiences uh, with Joanne. When were you first made aware that she had polycystic kidney disease?
When I received a telephone call from Janice, I was at that time living in Minnesota, and I was at the store. I remember I was at Sam's Club, and Janice was crying when I answered the phone, and she said, she has it, Suze. She has the disease, well, she said Joanne's in the hospital first, but she was crying so hard, and she was so shaken, and so was I. And she said, I remember she said, she wants to talk to you. You have to call her.
Okay. Would it be fair for me to say that this came as a shock or a surprise to both of your?
I was stunned. I completely fell apart because we were told, I mean, we had said to our parents when we found out that Mom and Janice had the disease, when we finally found that out, we said to Mom, well, why did you lie to us? And why? And then we said, are you lying now? Because she said, no, you two don't have the disease, to Joanne and I. But Joanne obviously does. And so yes, I was completely stunned. And so was Janice, obviously.
Okay. How old was Joanne when you first received notice?
Joanne had just turned 50 years old, which was the same age my mom had just turned 50 when she began her battle. I remember my mom said, watch out for 50, the wheels of your life fall off. And then Joanne was exactly like Mom. And what was different was Janice was so much younger. My mom used to always say Janice looked like Sister Mike. Sister Mike was real tall, and so is Janice. And Sister Mike developed the disease early. She died at 45, and Janice developed the disease early, like in her, I think, late 30s. I think she was supposed to start dialysis when she was 39.
Wow.
And so when Joanne collapsed, she had just turned 50.
Okay. When you finally made the phone call and spoke with Joanne, can you tell us what went on during that conversation?
I sure can. I just blurted it out that I'd give her a kidney. And why did I do that? I don't know, because it just came out of my mouth, and the minute I said it, I thought to myself, "Oh my God, I'm not going to give her a kidney. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that." But I said it, and I still to this day don't know why it was the first thing I said to her. And I know we hadn't been getting along, but I also know that I realized how much I really did love her, and I realized why we weren't getting along was because she's sick. She was sick. I think I had a revelation during the whole time I was being tested that the reason we weren't getting along was because you're sick, and when you're sick, you're not yourself.
Okay. So it would be fair for me to say that you had second thoughts.
Oh my goodness, yes. I whined and I worried right up to the moment I was whisked into surgery. And that, remember I told you my chronicle age, and I was 51 when Joanne collapsed, so I was 52 when I went into surgery. And the following week after we had the surgery was her birthday, and she turned 51. So we always say I gave her a kidney for her birthday present.
Oh, awesome. I also understand on one of the phone calls to Joanne, your daughter Colette was on the phone. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, it was actually my dad and Colette and I were on the telephone together. And my dad was in Florida when Joanne collapsed, and we were trying to help him find a flight to come back to Chicago, where Joanne was. And the three of us, Colette was at work, so she put, I mean, this is before social media and before cell phones, and she was doing a three-way call at work for us. And Colette said, well, Mom, I'll give her a kidney, because as soon as I hung up with Joanne, I was walking around telling everybody else, well, I can't do this. I'm not doing it. And Colette on the phone call with my dad said, well, I'll give her a kidney. And to be honest too, Jim, my dad said he would give her a kidney, and he was 80.
Okay. What was your reaction when your own daughter, Colette, volunteered to give a kidney?
Oh, all I thought immediately, I give myself credit, because I immediately said, absolutely not. What kind of cowardly mother would I be if I stepped back and let you help her? I mean, she was single. She didn't need to be doing that. And truly, and I know sounds hokey, but I truly felt like it was what God wanted me to do. And He's in control, but the entire time up to the time of surgery, I kept arguing with God in my head. I kept having a fight with who was in control. But I did. I really and truly thought that that it was what God wanted me to do. And Sister Mike had said that about giving up her place on the dialysis waiting list. And I believe it's hard to describe our faith, but it's just something that you just know.
Okay. Is it okay with you if I show the folks a few photographs from your book,
Of course.
your family? Just want to make sure. I apologize up front. These are kind of on the smaller side. I tried to make them bigger. There's your mother and her family. 6 of the 8 people in that photograph ended up with PKD. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And there's the 3 sisters, yourself, Joanne, and Janice, when you were young.
And we have leopard pants on, and if Joanna's listening, she would tell you that that's the one and only time you'll see her in leopard pants.
And this is the actual cover of your book, in case I got the title wrong. Shame on me, Jim, but that's the correct title.
Correct. And that's my daughter on the cover.
Okay. And we're going to talk about this a little later, but this is after your sister Joanne received your kidney?
Correct. Well, the newspaper did a 4-part series on us.
Okay.
The photographer even had witnessed my kidney being removed and filmed it and gave me the CD, but I can't look at it. I've never looked at it in 20 years.
I got to be honest with you. I can't blame you for that one. Whenever I go in for surgery now, I tell them, put me under. I've had a couple of doctors that decided to conduct a medical school class while they were doing various procedures with me, and I didn't care for it too much, Suzanne. I got to be honest with you. Approximately when was Joanne placed on dialysis?
She was the day after she arrived at the hospital. They put a catheter in her neck so they could do dialysis, and they performed dialysis in the next day.
Okay. And how long was she on dialysis?
She was on dialysis for 10 months.
Okay. Did they eventually put in a fistula or a graft?
No, because everyone knew I was being tested to be a donor, and when I think back, Jim, to dialyze for 10 months with a catheter, my goodness, the risk of infection, and she's a compliant, meticulous patient. I couldn't have given my kidney to someone who takes care of it so well. But even dialysis, she's just right on everything. And the reason it took so long was I mentioned the genetic test, because to be honest, because I was 51 years old, it was and Joanne had PKD, and they told us that she didn't have it. All I could think of was that I probably have PKD, because it just
Sure.
so for me, I was in fact, I had like a war going on. If I had it, that was bad, and if I had to give a kidney, then I'd have to give a kidney, and I didn't want to do that either. And so it kind of was just something that there were two things I was concerned with, and I couldn't quite get a answer as to whether or not I would develop PKD. And I would go and have all the tests, and I kept going. I lived out of state, so I would go have them sent from Minnesota to Chicago for the transplant coordinator to have all my results. And they found one cyst on one of my kidneys. Well, that just threw me into a loop. And she said it's probably an aged, as you age, you can develop a cyst. But then they wanted to be sure, so then the medical or the genetic tests happened, and that took months. And then the whole time that was going on, I couldn't quite get anybody to say, no, you're not. You're definitely not going to develop PKD. No one. Everybody was sort of hesitant, and sometimes when I can't sleep, I scroll through websites and read all these medical papers about PKD that I don't even understand. But one time I did that, and I read something that I could understand, that I knew might be able to help. So I sent an email to Dr. Terry Watnick, and at the time she was at Johns Hopkins, and she called me the next day at work, and I was in my cubicle, and I was stunned that someone would just pick up the phone and call. And she said it was about as likely as hen's teeth that I would develop PKD. And I actually had to look up what that meant, because I had never heard the expression hen's teeth, but I guess hens don't have teeth. So I always love her to pieces for taking the time. She's a giant in the PKD world. I think she's at the University of Maryland now.
Okay.
So she's the one that, when she said that to me, it was what I needed. And I just realized that I was meant to do that.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about how you were cleared ultimately to donate a kidney to Joanne.
Mhm.
What transplant center was Joanne at?
Northwestern.
Okay, in Chicago.
Yes, we probably have built that wing between my mom and Janice had their transplants there. I have two cousins who had their transplant there. So yes, it was Northwestern.
Okay. One of the things that you hear over and over again is that when a family has PKD that runs in that family, a lot of centers won't allow a family member to donate to another family member. In your case, what happened with that? Why did they allow you to donate?
Well, gosh, Jim, if I had known that, I would have gotten out of it if I went to a different center. I don't know if it was because they knew my family, but I really don't know. There was we were a little, I was a lot frustrated with the experience because they didn't seem like they had enough help. I really wasn't pleased with my coordinator. Joanne had trouble too. And we just sort of got, I don't know if they knew because we had already Mom and Janice's transplant there. I remember the head of the department, Dr. Stewart, did my mom's transplant, and I hoped he could do mine, and he retired just before that. So I don't know if it's because they knew us, but nobody even blinked.
Raised the issue, huh? I know you
They
referred to your transplant coordinator, and if I'm speaking out of school, let me know, as Dumb Dory.
Well, I didn't, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I really had no intention to publish this. This was written so that the younger family members would know about Sister Mike, because what Sister Mike did, I didn't want anybody to forget that. But so my writing group encouraged me to publish the book, and I spoke to a literary attorney, and she said, you can, I didn't want to get sued for writings about somebody who, so I changed the name. And and I and I remembered her telling me, you can write everything from your viewpoint and you don't have to worry. And that's why, it's in the first person. And so,
You've talked to us about the physical and the medical aspects of your being okayed for a transplant, but you've also talked to us a little bit about doubts. How are you cleared psychologically?
well, that's probably the funniest experience because we have a friend whose name is Sean that is like a son to us. And he had given his mother a kidney the 2 years before I gave Joanne the kidney. He was, it's a beautiful story about Sean, and he's a beautiful man, and we still love him. And he was the one that helped me through my worries and my fears. But I do remember one time calling him, and he said, because he was not at all hesitant. He wanted to give his mother a kidney. There was no stopping him, and the doctors had told him that he was a little overweight and he smoked, and he quit all that and lost weight and got in shape, and he donated his mother a kidney. And so he told me while I was going through the testing that there was no way in hell that I was going to pass the psychological test. So I didn't have to worry because I just wouldn't make it through the psychological testing. And when I went, I was nervous about it too. But when I went in for the visit right before it was, I think it was my birthday. That's when I figured they would do the psychological testing, and it never happened. I never had the only thing that I think they counted as a psychological test was if I wanted to not do it, I could say that they would say that I didn't pass something, or I could get out of it. And did I want to? And I remember I would never have been able to live with myself. And I did think about when she said it, I thought, oh my goodness, I could get out of this if I wanted. But I knew I'd never be able to live with myself because all my medical tests had been coming back that I was in good shape. And I
Did
was
you have concerns that there was a possibility of rejection even after you donated a kidney?
not at all. Not when the first thing I woke up, when I remember waking up and realizing that I didn't die, which I thought I might. And the second thing was they told me that the kidney peed on the table. And I knew that everything was going to be okay.
Okay. You mentioned a pre-surgery meeting on your birthday. If I'm recalling correctly from your book, you were upset because somebody was supposed to book a hotel for
Well,
you, and
yes,
that didn't happen.
right. That was one part, but the other part was the doctors. The doctors weren't there. They were at some summit, and Bill and I had flown from California to Chicago. We were in California for a trip, a business function he had. And so we would have gone back to Minnesota if we had known that. That was I think that was probably the most frustrating day, and wondering what the heck are we doing? And we could never get a phone call returned. And I remember thinking, this isn't a dental appointment we're making. I still wonder if they're better equipped now, but it was a really touchy situation that day.
Okay. Let's talk about October 19th, 2004, the date of the transplant. Can you tell us what occurred on that date?
Well, we had the surgery was that morning, and we stayed at the hotel across the street. And when we walked over in that morning, I still remember there were people jogging, and it was a beautiful day. It was like an Indian summer day in Chicago. And I remember saying to Bill, oh, and Sean came in to be with me for that. And I remember saying to the two of them as we walked across the street, I wanted to get in with the joggers and just run away. And to Joanne's credit, she had said to me all the time, all during those long months of testing, she'd say, Suzanne, you can change your mind. I understand if you have to change your mind. And I thought about changing my mind when I saw that group of joggers, but I went through the doors of the of the hospital, and Joanne was there. And she didn't have to be there that early, but she was there. And she said she wasn't quite sure that I would show up. And I said, well, I haven't done it yet, Joanne. I still wasn't sure I could go through it.
Okay. Do you remember anything specifically about the transplant being taken down? Anything you can
Sure.
tell us specifically?
I remember being on the gurney, and my daughter's there. Well, the waiting room, the doctors were shocked at what a crowd was in the waiting room. And they were all lined up in the hall. I remember that. And I remember thinking to myself that Sean's mother had told me that a sense of peace came over her when it was time for her to go into surgery. And my mother always told me that if you ever have to have surgery, that you just have to pray to the Holy Spirit. And I did that, and and obviously I had the IV, and so that was it. I don't remember that. I do remember that they told me afterward, Joanne and our gurneys passed each other, and I think I said, am I going or coming? So I didn't remember that at all, though.
Okay. There was some newspaper publicity surrounding the transplant, both before and after. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I still remember that. What I most remember is it was the day. It was the front page of the day after the surgery, and Joanne she had the thumbs up, and she said, and the headline was, "She did it for me." And the being in the hospital, the hospital, we had been robbed in the hospital, but my dad needed to go to the hospital. He was having trouble urinating because he forgot his medicine. And so it was all about urine. But I remember Joanne's surgeon came in to my hospital room, and I was there alone, and he came in and shook my hand, and he goes, I have to come in and shake the hand of the woman who put me on the front page. because he said all of his, there's a picture of him with placing the kidney in Joanne's belly. And so I remember that. And it was, there was newspapers flying everywhere and everybody was happy, and it was a happy day. I was so happy. It was
Excellent.
over.
Talk to us a little bit about your current condition after donating. How is your health?
Well, I'm fine. I'm blessed, and I think that's what I most want people to know. One of my biggest fears was, would it change my life? And I've been able to do all that I used to do. I know when I talk to you, Jim, when I talk to all the kidney disease patients that I see and know and talk to, I feel how blessed have I been to have such good help compared to what all of you have to suffer through. But I feel like I have to help. I just feel blessed, and I'm older. I like Joanne. She said we have more wrinkles and more scars, but I've definitely slowed down. I can feel it. I'm 71 now. And Joanne, we're just like two old ladies in their early 70s fighting to stay, to keep it together. Um, I'm blessed. It's been a couple rough years for us, but I am a rough, so I can handle them.
Right.
Yes. Joanne's doing well. She's aged and slowed down. I think the pandemic put a real damper on Joanne's life. And she has, in January, it was the first time she was ever hospitalized since the transplant. And it was for a double pneumonia. So her immune system is on shaky ground. And I feel like COVID, she's very frightened of COVID, as she rightly should be. All of us, at older people and anybody with transplant. I've been concerned about COVID because of just having one kidney, so I'm real careful. But other than that, we didn't like the pandemic, but who did?
Right. Right. I I read a note that you sent to me that your 20th anniversary of your reluctant donation is coming up this year in October. Do you have anything special planned?
We're talking about what we want to do. I think I am trying to I'm trying to write another book about the past 20 years, because the disease keeps on marching through our family. So that we like to celebrate it, but there's been heartache in our family over the disease, and some of it is so painful that it's hard for us to be obnoxiously joyous about it when
Okay.
others have had failed transplants.
By the way, somebody who calls himself The Journey has been leaving comments in the broadcast. They're all flattering, mostly toward you. Well, exclusively towards you. So I don't know who The Journey is, but thank you for tuning in. And um, I'm sure that Suzanne appreciates your support. Let's talk about your book, The Reluctant Donor. Why did you write this book?
I really wrote it so that the younger family members would not forget Sister Mike. And when I knew it was hereditary, I really hoped that I knew there would be more down the line. And so I wrote it so that the family would have something to know and read. But when I belong to a writing group, and the book wouldn't have happened without them either. And they encouraged me to publish it because they learned so much about kidneys, so much about polycystic kidney disease. And then they also, one woman told me that she would never, ever, ever be an organ donor, even if she was dead. And at the book launch party, she came in and showed me that she had changed her driver's license, and in case she became an organ donor on her driver's license. So that's what motivated me.
Okay. I noticed that there are a lot of details in your book compared to some other kidney writers. I mean, you have conversation and remembrances due to your journaling before you wrote the book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I've always been I've always written. Joanne always said that about me, and I just would keep. I had a little diary when I was, I think, in seventh grade, and it had a little key on it, and you could write down. And I kind of think that's what got me started. I liked keeping track of. Now I try to do a gratitude journal, but I like to keep track of some of the things that I've done and thought about. And I
Okay.
really just think it was a matter of just wanting to remember I just wanted everyone so much in the family to remember Sister Mike. And you know what? The most amazing thing is that the people that have come up to me in when
What's that?
I do something. There was a woman who had a dog-eared copy of the book, and she told me, would I sign it? And she said, I take this book with me to dialysis because your mother makes me laugh so much, and I feel so much better at dialysis. And then I've had people come up to me and say, that the book is what's got them to understand what a living donor goes through, someone who is on dialysis. One woman was on the plane, and she took the book, and she sent me a message saying that she was on the plane laughing and crying. And I always say, I'm glad the book made you laugh and cry, because that's what life does. It makes you laugh and cry.
All right. You have at least one award that I know of, that you have won for this book that you published in 2010. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
The Illumination Award, it's a Catholic group and I think it's because the book really has a little bit of my faith, or a lot of bit of my faith in it. But I
Okay.
think the awards, Jim, are nothing compared to the emails. I've got emails from the Netherlands, from London, from Canada. I have a man in my Toastmaster group that donated kidney. He's moved away maybe 5 years ago, and out of the Clear Blue Sky list past April, he called me and he said, my best friend needs a kidney, Suzanne, and I remember your story. And he was panicking because the surgery was coming up, and he had offered it to his friend, and I talked him through it. And I'm so humbled by somebody actually reading. There's so many books, and there's so little time, and so many books, and somebody saved somebody's life because of my family stories. That just makes me want to do an Irish jig.
Okay. And just so people know, scrolling across the screen now, if you're interested in purchasing the book, that is the link that's scrolling across the screen to Amazon, where you can find the reluctant donor. And this is the link to Suzanne's website. If you go to that particular link, there's all kinds of places you can go to from there to purchase the book. And also, This is the link to Chicken Soup for the Soul. They're in part responsible for publishing Suzanne's book. The other thing is that if you go to my Facebook page, Jim Myers, if you go to my Facebook page, at the top of my Facebook page, this broadcast is pinned to the top. In the comments to the broadcast is all of my research that I did on Suzanne, which is pretty extensive. But the links that you're seeing scrolling across the screen, those links are contained in that material. Anything I could find where she did another interview or a broadcast, excuse me, the newspaper articles that we've been discussing, anything that I could find that had to do with Suzanne, or places where you can find her, like on Facebook or Twitter, X, or LinkedIn, all of those links are there. So if you want to do a little drilling down on Miss Ruff, you can do that. Suzanne, you mentioned to me before the broadcast, there's one other place people can go to buy your book. Where is that?
Through my website, SuzanneRuff.com, and then also through my publisher, Beavers Pond Press.
Okay.
It's
And
on Amazon too.
Chicken Soup for the Soul, by the way, their books are kind of published behind the scene by Simon and Schuster. So that might be another place where you can find it. Okay.
Well, the Chicken Soup for the Souls are complete separate books that I've written. It's different stories. So in those, so that's different from the Reluctant Donor.
Okay. Let's talk about some of your kidney advocacy experiences. I was reading about you and the AAKP. Oh my God, you have done so much for them for so long. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with the American Association of Kidney Patients?
Well, Jim, you know I'm honored to serve on many of the advocacy councils with you. So you're just as busy, if not busier. I'm just not as good at podcasts and at technology. But all of my advocacy is because of my little book that sprouted wings. And I am most humbled to have been involved with AAKP. And when I stuffed envelopes and licked stamps and all that for it was known as NAF. And that was in like 1982. That was how long I've known about AAKP. It was a different name then, and my dad was on the board with them when I probably was in my 20s, and that's how I started out helping with them. And I think I joined the board in 2013. I can't say enough good about AAKP, especially if you are a patient, a kidney patient, or a family member, or a friend of someone with kidney disease. I truly feel it's the best place for a patient to turn to because it's free to join AAKP. Jim, you agree with me. Their podcasts, their broadcasts, anything. There's somebody that you can reach out to all the time with questions. There's ways to get involved, and the leadership at AAKP, Paul and the Ed and Richard and Deanna. I mean, it's just Diana, the whole group, Jerome, Val, every one of them care deeply about a patient. PKD, I mentioned my dad helped form the first chapter, and as they were called in Chicago. Joanne was a walk coordinator. NKF, I was on the Living Donor Council, and with Kelly Collins there, we started the peer program for people who wanted to think about becoming a living donor, because 20 years ago, there was not as much out there. And again, I mention it again, there was not social media. And so you had to just kind of plow through reading different things. But all of these organizations that Jim and I are involved in will help you get through what all of you are going through. And if you're a family member, you need to join too, because you learn so much to help your loved one. The two PCORI programs I've been on, I'm presently on another one called STEPS. And then Jim, you and I are both on the OTSCA, and what an honor that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally dedicated to polycystic kidney disease patients, caretakers, and that sort of thing. The AAKP, they just had their global summit. Their national meeting is coming up in September. Back in Florida, your Uncle Jim is trying to save his pennies and dimes so he gets to go. Suzanne's also been active in the Polycystic Kidney Disease Foundation, co-chair of the finance committees of the Twin Cities chapter between 2006 and 2010. Can you talk about your experiences with the PKD Foundation?
Yeah, the group in Minnesota was phenomenal. We raised so much money, and it was a really nice group of people. Joanne has headed up the Charlotte chapter of the PKD Walk, and my dad was. I mentioned to you he helped create the first chapter, but he always says his claim to fame was that he made the phone call that resulted in the first federal funding for polycystic kidney research. And that would have been back in 1982 when it was being formed. He knew that the two men that helped start the foundation, and he was, I mean, back when my dad had to look for help for my mom, and you had to make long distance telephone calls, which, cost $17, and you tried to make them on Sunday. So when I think when I go out and try to advocate, and I always want the patients to be like my mother was and remember how lucky they are, because even though you don't have the hope or you feel lucky, compared to how far we've come and how far we want to go, there is hope. And that's what I think you and I want to give to anybody listening more than anything.
Some kind of hope or steps to find a cure for
The
polycystic
cure.
kidney disease.
We mentioned OTSCA, and they came up with the first treatment for PKD, tolvaptan, or Genarq, as it's called. That was approved before my father died, and he always said that he didn't want to leave this earth before there was some treatment for PKD. And that, in 2018, was FDA approved. My dad died in 2019. It was the first treatment ever for PKD. We have lots of things in the works now, and I think I'll pick up my dad's words and say I do not want to die before there's a cure. I want a cure more than a treatment. And I'm sure you do.
In terms of your advocacy work, is there anything coming up in the near future that you can talk to us about that you're doing? You did mention that you may have a new book in the works.
Well, I'm trying to write a new book. Over the past 20 years, I've kept a little. I've interviewed a couple of my cousins. What did I tell you? We've had 10 transplants to 11 transplants to 10 different people.
Wow.
And so we've had 5 living donors now, I was the first, and I'm so proud of the rest of the family that donated. We have so much to be grateful for, and so much to keep doing, though. We really need to keep working and pushing and trying hard. As far as what's coming up, like you mentioned, the AAKP's National Patient Meeting and Conference, September 25th to the 27th, and it is also virtual and it's free. If you can't make it to Florida, you won't be sorry if you join that. And I love the PCORI study I'm on. With that paper is going to be published probably next year, 2025. And that's an amazing story or an amazing study called STEPS. The others, and then of course the work I do with you, Jim, on the advocacy OTSCA PAC Council.
Right, right. Let's talk about your work as a professional writer. I found two newspapers, the Minnesota Eden Prairie News, and I thought I saw a lot of articles that had to do with kidney disease and PKD, things of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about your work?
Most of my newspaper articles, I have done a few on World Kidney Day. My editors used to say, "Oh no, Suzanne, you don't want to do another kidney story, do you?" And so I sometimes laugh and say some of my articles are about fluff. It's just some of the like silly articles, but they did let me do some about kidneys, and mostly, especially World Kidney Day, and then Donate Life Month and Sabbath Sunday. So we did those, but most of the articles, I did a fabulous story on a World War II veteran that was in Hiroshima. I mean, it was Iwo Jima, and it was that was my probably most amazing story, because the radio guys were talking about it one day, that day that it was published. But most of they didn't let me do very many kidney stories.
Okay. It is my custom, Suzanne, when I have guests on the broadcast, that I ask them if they have any final statement they would like to make to our audience before we conclude the broadcast. So do you have any final statement that you would like to make this evening?
I would say this, one of my favorite phrases: don't stay in your dark little corner when spring is dancing upon the hills. And by that I mean, if you've been diagnosed with any disease, don't stay in the dark. You can cry, and you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get involved. And if you're a kidney patient, join AAKP. It's free, and you'll make so many friends and you'll find hope. So don't stay in your dark little corner when spring is dancing upon the hills.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Suzanne, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing your story and talking about your terrific experiences with kidney donation, and talking about your book and your advocacy work. And I'm just in awe of your dedication to polycystic kidney disease patients and people like me that have lost members of their family and had to go through the pain of being diagnosed after you realize that you've lost so many people in your family to this particular disease, and the tremendous motivation that you obviously have to advocate for all of us. I'm just in awe of your dedication and your tremendous talent.
Oh, thank you, Jim. But you're doing just as much, and you've done it through a lot of difficulty, and my hat goes out to you.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Um, I'm going to let you go now, Suzanne. I've kept you for over an hour. I have a little bit to button up with my audience, um, just to tell them who's going to be on uh, next, and to thank everybody for checking out the broadcast. But you did such a tremendous job. I mean, I learned so much tonight just by listening to you, and I'm sure the people in our audience did. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to speak with us.
I sincerely thank you, Jim.
All right. You have a good night, Suzanne.
You
And
too.
thank you again. I'll drop you a note as soon as I'm done here.
Okay.
All right. So that's our broadcast for tonight. Our friend Lisa G. Lisa, I want to thank you for checking out the broadcast. Next week, we have a new guest on. That's Melanie Betts. She's a dietitian. We're going to talk about diet. That's Friday, August 2nd, the day before my birthday. I'm going to be 70, August 3rd. The time has changed. Melanie wants to go at 12 noon. She has responsibilities and children. So the late night thing isn't going to work for her. So broadcast next week at noon. I want to thank everybody for watching, and watch this space, because we'll be on again next week, and we're going to be talking kidney diet next week. So I'll see you soon.